Colossians 1 and verse 19. And I have a little bit of a goal. I'd like to get through a couple of verses tonight. Colossians 1. Yeah, I sure did, didn't I? Colossians 1 and verse 19. Excuse me, Colossians 1 and verse 16. I said 19 all those times and no one corrected me. Colossians 1 and verse 16, y'all were like, oh man, we're farther along than what we thought. Colossians 1 and verse 16, Paul writes, "For by him all things were created, that are in heaven and that are on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or principalities or powers. All things were created through him and for him, and he is before all things, and in him all things consist." We're talking about what Jesus has done, and we're building up to what Jesus is doing, but currently we're looking at the past, right? Not the present. We're looking at the past. What has Jesus done? He has created all things, Paul says, and he is before all things. That is, he precedes all things. He existed before all things. And so, though there was maybe a little bit of confusion from a couple of verses prior in which Paul says that Jesus is the firstborn of creation, this verse solidifies that Jesus was not created. Right? Though he was the firstborn of creation, that does not mean that he is a part of creation. He facilitated creation. He has priority over creation. He outranks creation, but he was not created. Anyway, other verses about Jesus created the heavens and the earth. We looked at that a lot last week. John 1 through 3. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. Hebrews 1 through 3. He's the brightness of his glory. Without him, God the Father made the worlds through Jesus. One we didn't look at last week is Ephesians 3:8 through 9, in which Paul writes, "To me, who am less than the least of all saints, this grace was given that I should preach among the Gentiles the unsearchable riches of Christ, to make all see what is the fellowship of the mystery from the beginning of the ages has been hidden in God who created all things through Jesus Christ." So several verses all allude to the fact that Jesus created all things. He himself was not created. Not only do we learn how the universe was created from here, who created the universe, but we also get another glimpse at why they were created, right? Notice that they were, verse 16, they were all created through him and for him, right? We just so happened to, last Sunday, talk about the two reasons why the universe was created, right? Number one, it's for God. Revelation 4 and verse 11, out of the King James. I like the King James a lot better there. For your pleasure they are and were created, for God's pleasure. New King James says will, but I think we get some more nuance there with the word pleasure. For God's pleasure, because God wanted to, he created the heavens and the earth. Right? They were and are created. They are sustained because God wants them sustained. Right? That's primary reason. Reason number one why the universe was created for him. Colossians 1 verse 16. But secondary reason is for whom? It's for us. For us to inhabit, for us to have dominion over, for us to enjoy, right? One of the arguments, and it's a lesser argument, it's not usually brought up, but one of the arguments for creationism, for proving God's existence, is it's the aesthetic argument. What's aesthetic? Yeah, it's the appreciation of beauty. That's a great way of summarizing. Somebody else have something? Yeah. It's the appreciation of, yeah, I mean, it's aesthetically pleasing, we might say, right? If we were animals, if we were evolved from animals, and all we thought about was survival, there would be no purpose for aesthetic. There would be no purpose for beauty, for appeal, right? And yet there is this aesthetic. We can marvel at the universe. God created the universe for us to marvel at, for us to find aesthetically pleasing, right? So anyway, we get another glimpse here from Colossians 1 verse 16, why the universe was created. Romans 11:30, him and to him are all things, to whom be glory forever, amen. Right? For him, to him, through him are all things, right? Again, it's for the Lord. Proverbs, the Lord has made all for himself, yes, even the wicked, for the day of doom. Everything was created for him, by him. In 1 verse 16. For two of them can be combined into one for our purposes. Notice what he writes. 1 verse 16, for by him all things were created that are in heaven and that are on earth. There's two categories, heaven and earth. And then here's your next subcategories, whether visible or invisible. The way that the sentence is constructed, you can picture it like a chart. You've got heaven and earth, and you've got visible and invisible. You've got visible and invisible things on earth, and you've got visible and invisible things on heaven. However, can we see the visible things in heaven? No, so they're invisible to us. So technically, for us, for practical purposes, everything in heaven is invisible. So we end up with three different sections, three different categories of creation. We've got invisible things in heaven, and then we've got visible and invisible things on earth. Right? Then he gives several different examples about those invisible and visible things on earth, whether principalities or powers or dominions or thrones. I did that out of order. Jesus created all of them. He created these four different ranks within societies. Now, what's really interesting here is that Paul is saying that there are visible thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers on earth. And there are invisible thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers on earth. Right? Now, what are the visible thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers? By the way, these four words, thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers, they're all generic, right? I don't think any of them mean anything specific. Probably the most specific one is thrones. Dominions literally means authorities. Principalities literally means first in rank. And powers means governmental rule. So even whenever we define these terms, they're still general, right? They're governmental rule, first in authority, authority in general, all right? I don't think these words are supposed to be specific. You think about our governments, the governments of the world, right? The way that we set up a government in the United States is different than the way they set up a government, let's say, in China or North Korea. And the way that they set up a government in China and North Korea is different than how they did it in feudal Europe. We've abandoned feudalism now. Anyway, throughout the generations, there's been a variety of different governmental orderings. There have been a variety of different ways of doing government. Obviously, today, the primary ones are democracy, republic, totalitarianism. We still get a little bit of oligarchy there in Britain, and we still get a little bit of theocracy in Israel. But anyway, we've boiled it down now, the different types of government. Anyway, I say that to say, I don't think these are supposed to be specific terms. I think they're supposed to be general terms, right? And when we're talking about general forms of government, right, general ranks of government, the visible ones are very easy to spot, right? Let's think about the ranks in the United States. You start at those three branches of government: executive, legislative, and judicial, the president, whatever. And then you work your way down. Let's just use the executive, for example. You start with the president, and then it goes down to the governors, and then it goes down to the mayors, and so on and so forth, right? There's this visible ranking of a government. There's this visible ranks that we can see on earth. All that to ask this question: what are the invisible ranks? Yeah, Rita's looking at my notes here. Y'all knew that already, didn't you? Yeah. What are you reading, Rita? Oh, you're just looking at your finger there. I thought. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. This is the verse. This is the verse that a lot of people will go to whenever they're studying angels, to point out that there is probably implicitly a hierarchy of angels here on earth, right? And there are other verses that allude to this fact, but this is probably the most straightforward, if we can label it like that. Is there are thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers of angels. Let's open our Bibles to Daniel chapter 10. Daniel chapter 10, and we're going to begin in verse 12 here. This is another clear, somewhat clear example of angelic authorities, angelic rankings on earth. Daniel chapter 10, beginning in verse 12. A lot of people assume this is probably Gabriel, because Gabriel appears the chapter before. In any case, this is an angel. Daniel 10, beginning in verse 12. Then he said to me, then the angel said to Daniel, "Do not fear, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand and to humble yourself before your God, your words were heard, and I have come because of your words. But the prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, and behold, Michael, one of the chief princes, came to me, for I had been left alone there with the king." Days for this angel to come and answer Daniel's prayer. God sent this angel to answer Daniel's prayer. And it took him 21 days. Why did it take him 21 days to get to Daniel? It took him 21 days because he was fighting. Who was he fighting? King James phrases him as the Prince of Persia, right? I forget what the New King James, the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia is what the New King. Okay, so they're the same. The Prince of Persia is withstanding this angel, and not just this one angel. What other angel is teaming up with this first one? What angel is named there in Daniel? Michael. Michael, and this other angel, again, some people think it's Gabriel. Gabriel appears in the chapter before. Michael and this other angel are teaming up, and together they can't withstand the Prince of Persia. Now, another context clue here is you've heard of Michael described as the archangel, right? That's how Jude describes him. Daniel does not describe him as an archangel here. How does Daniel describe him? How does this angel describe Michael? Yeah, one of the chief princes, right? Now that's a good context clue for us, because what this angel is describing is Michael as a prince, and there's this other prince in the context too, right? And so if one prince is an angel, contextually speaking, it's likely that the other prince is an angel, right? And so you've got these, essentially, you've got one angel going against these other two angels, and that makes sense, right? Because no human being is able to withstand an angel, right? Just for one example, there in 1 Kings 18, whenever the army of Assyria was perched out Jerusalem's front doors, 185,000 people were killed in one night by one angel, the angel of the Lord. Right? Okay, if one angel can kill all of the Jonesboro metropolitan area, our population is about 140,000, so 185,000 was killed in one night. If one angel can kill that many people in one night, do you think one human can withstand two angels for 21 days? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Right? So you've got one angel, the Prince of Persia, going against two angels, this angel and Michael. And then another context clue here is that this angel who's going against these other two, how is he described? He's the Prince of what? Prince of Persia. Why is he attached to Persia? I have no idea. And guess what? Nobody has any idea, because this is the, like I said, this is the clearest view, clearest passage on it, and so we have no answers besides this, So let me tell you what I think it sounds like, and there's going to be probably a few different opinions on it, but to me, what this sounds like, and by the way, this is not important stuff, right? When it comes to angels, it's not important. If it were important, the Lord would have written more on it, on the subject of angels. The Bible is not written to satisfy your curiosity. The Bible is written for us to pursue life and godliness, 2 Peter 1 and verse 3. That's why the Bible is written. Anyway, here's what I think about the matter. I think there might be an angel, several angels per nation, and they have something to do with how nations are run, providentially speaking. We know that angels operate via providence in some ways. I think it was for Jacob, but it could have been for Isaac. No, I think it's the other way around. For Isaac, they sent the servant, and Abraham said that an angel was going to go before him to find the mate for Isaac up in Padan Aram. Anyway, so we know that angels work in some degree with providence, and my thought, comparing this to the Colossians passage, my thought is that there's a national working together between angels and nations. Obviously, I don't think the nations are aware of it, but there is that behind-the-scenes action of angels anyway. All right. We'll read a couple more passages, and then we'll open up for thoughts and questions and comments. All right. Next passage is Jude 1, verse 9. Jude 1 and verse 9, right along these things here, talking about Michael again. Jude 1, verse 9, yet Michael the archangel, in contending with the devil, when he disputed about the body of Moses, dared not bring against him a rivaling accusation, but said, the Lord rebuke you. All right, two things to point out. One thing about Michael, one thing about Satan. All right, Michael is an archangel. Right, that shows that there is a ranking of angels, and that also shows that Michael is not to be trifled with any normal human being. He's trifling with the devil. Right. Second thing is he says, "I won't rebuke you. The Lord rebuke you." Right. That somewhat, kind of, sort of hints at the fact that Satan is a high-ranking angel. And the last passage we'll look at is Ephesians 2, 1 and 2, which might shed a little bit more light on Satan's rank. Ephesians 2, 1 and 2, not referencing Satan by name or by position, as in the devil. Ephesians 2, 1 and 2, Paul says, "And you God made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience." Right? We know from Daniel, we know from Jude, that a prince is sometimes a reference to an angel's rank. And here, Paul is most reasonably referring to Satan, because this is one he's describing how we were once disobedient and we were walking according to the authority of the prince of the power of the air. Right? In other words, we were walking according to the devil's rule. So the devil here is implicitly described as the prince of the power of the air, which might suggest that he is an archangel like Michael. Obviously a fallen angel, though. Obviously, right? For the devil and his angels. So that's going to cover Colossians 1:16. Thoughts on that? Angels, on on here. Jesus creating all things, not being created himself. Already about angels. That's a very interesting. Very interesting. It's though it might be review for some of us, I've every time I come back to it, I'm more and more intrigued by it. About what exactly angels are doing behind the scenes. Another two things talking about angels. What they do is in Hebrews 1, it says that angels minister to those who will inherit salvation. So again, they're providentially helping Christians. And there's a verse in Matthew, too, that describes how angels help minister. I forget the action word there. Little children. So anyway. All right, Colossians 1 verse 18, if anyone has nothing on angels. Colossians 1 verse 18. Paul continues, "And he, Jesus, is the head of the body, the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence." So a few different characteristics of Jesus here. First of all, Jesus is the head of the body, which is the church. Obviously, most of us, if not all of us, know that the terms body and church are used interchangeably in the New Testament. Ephesians 1:22 and 23 says very similar to what Paul says here in Colossians. He put all things under Jesus' feet and gave him to be head over all things to the church, which is his body, the fullness of him who fills all in all. To these Colossians who were being challenged by those who would corrupt the church, this was a very, very, very necessary reminder that Christ decides what is and what is not permissible in his church, right? We don't get to come in and decide, hey, let's, use a piano. Hey, let's, set up a bishop and an archbishop and a pope. We don't get to decide how the church functions. We don't get to decide how the church worships. We don't get to decide who enters the church, how they enter the church, right? That's all Jesus. Jesus gets to decide that. All authority is given on me in heaven and earth. Go ye therefore teach all nations. Right? That's our role, is to teach all nations, baptize them once they've believed and obeyed. Right? Our job is not to change what has been said. We're not the head. We have no directorial discretion to be illiterate. We have to just do what Jesus has said. All right, here's a little bit of an illustration on Jesus' authority. Let's say that you were being pulled over by a police officer. You're driving down the highway, you get pulled over because you're going 90 miles an hour over the speed limit. Now, some of you might have done that tonight, but you shouldn't have. You shouldn't have. There are a few different things that you can say to that officer whenever he pulls you over, knocks on the window. Why were you driving so fast? You can say, but you can lie. And you can say, sorry, officer, my car broke and I couldn't go any slower. I couldn't help but speed. All right, that would be blaming inevitability. It's inevitable that I was going to speed. I couldn't help. Or you can say, sorry, officer, I didn't see this. That's an appeal to ignorance. By the way, if you're going 90 miles over the speed limit on a highway, boy, you need better glasses if you didn't see the speed limit. The speed limit, that's an appeal to ignorance. You could also say, I'm not sorry, officer. I was going the speed that should be the limit. It's your fault that I was, quote unquote, speeding. That would be an appeal to moral superiority, and it probably wouldn't get you very far. And the next one, you could bat your eyelashes at the cop and say, officer, are you really going to charge little old me with speeding? That would be an appeal to flattery, right? And some of y'all don't have long enough eyelashes for that one. And the last one is you can fess up and say sorry. You can even throw in a few tears and howl and beg. And that would be an appeal to pity. Which of those do you think is going to work on an officer if you're going 90 miles an hour down the road above the speed limit? I think pity might have the best, right? But if you were going 90 miles an hour over the speed limit, are you really that sorry? No. And the officer is going to know that. Okay, the reason I bring up all of these, inevitability, ignorance, moral superiority, flattery, and pity, the reason I bring up all of these is because this is how people treat God, right? We've sinned, we've broken the law, and we haven't broken it just a little bit, right? Even a little white lie is a huge blot on our souls, right? There are rankings of sin, right? Some sins are worse than others. So whenever you see on social media God's view of sin and they're all equal, that's not true. He described in Genesis how the iniquity of the Amorites was not yet full, indicating that they hadn't sinned enough to be taken out yet. Similarly, in Revelation, talking about either Israel or the Roman Empire, the cup of wrath is not yet full, indicating they had not yet sinned enough to be cast down. We get a glimpse of that too in Matthew 5, verse 14. You are the salt of the earth, but the salt has lost its savor. Wherewith shall it be salted? It's good for nothing, but be cast out and trodden underfoot of men. Right? So, to some degree, your good levels out your bad. Not that you can do so much good to earn salvation, you can't. But anyway, there are rankings of sin, but even a little sin is enough to condemn your soul to hell. Right? We've all sped 90 miles over the speed limit. We've all messed up morally, big time. But what people do is they come to God and they say, God, you can't condemn me. It was inevitable that I was going to sin. Are you really going to send me to hell because I had to sin? That's an appeal to inevitability. Other people are going to cite ignorance. Lord, I didn't know that was a sin. Are you really going to condemn me because I didn't know it was a sin? Other people are going to appeal to moral superiority. Yeah, I sinned, but that shouldn't have been a sin. You did the rules wrong. Other people are going to appeal to flattery. God, you're such a loving God. Are you really going to condemn little old me? Other people are going to appeal to pity. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I didn't want to sin. Which of those are going to work? Jesus has all authority on heaven and on earth. He is the head. And though we might want to change things in his church, and of course, the reason why there are so many churches is because people want to change things, and they use these appeals. Of course, they haven't written them down. But they use these appeals, and guess which one of these appeals is going to work against his authority? Not a one of them. You can't challenge his authority. You can't weasel your way out of his authority. What's the only thing that you should do? You were going 90 miles over the speed limit. Any one of those things could have been true. What you should do is confess, and then you should go the speed limit after. That's what you should do on a spiritual level, right? Anyway. Any thoughts or questions or comments on that illustration before we go to any more verses?
Somebody else had mentioned love to have the preeminence or something.
Yeah, Diotrephes. Yeah, that's right. That's right. People all the time, in all the churches, you'll find men who rise up who love the preeminence, who love to, have their egos brushed and whatnot. Probably most guilty of them all is the Pope, though he doesn't have nearly as much preeminence as he would like to anymore. The Pope used to be so much more popular, and I hate that we now have an American Pope, because that has really popularized Catholicism a little bit here in the States, a little bit more than what it was. What's that? Yeah, it very well could have been, the first American Pope, and I've seen a lot more stuff about Catholicism here in the States now since he became Pope. In any case, yeah, there are several men across the churches who seek to have preeminence. Ought not to be the case. Truth be told, everyone who's not a part of the Lord's church, the church that the Lord established, that the Lord will save, everyone outside of the Lord's church is seeking preeminence in some degree, because they're not bending to the will of the Father. They're not submitting to the will of Jesus. They are defiant in one capacity or another. Right? Yeah. Thoughts, questions, or comments? Point out Jesus' authority is that Jesus has the right. He has the right to condemn. And he is going to condemn everyone who is disobedient to him. I have no pleasure in saying that, but that's the truth. In 2 Thessalonians 1 verse 8, Paul describes Jesus condemning the disobedient, saying, in flaming fire, taking vengeance on those who do not know God and on those who do not obey the gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. All right, all those who defy his authority are going to end up being punished. So, man, we didn't finish those verses. Well, we got through 2 and a quarter. So that's we'll do better next week. We'll work on it.